A Quiet Place Part 2 is directed, written, and produced by John Krasinski. It stars Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, Cillian Murphy, Noah Jupe, and John Krasinski. It is the direct sequel to 2018's A Quiet Place and picks up right where the first one left off. I absolutely love the first one. It really wasn't a monster movie. At heart, it was a movie about a family, which is what made it so special and unique. This does include spoilers for both A Quiet Place movies, so if you haven't seen them yet, you should probably stop watching. I was skeptical about a sequel for one main reason. The first movie built up the relationships between Lee and his kids, but now, with Lee dead, I was worried that Evelyn and her relationship with her kids would not be enough to carry this movie. I was dead wrong. This movie is absolutely fantastic. The opening scene is one of my favorite opening scenes in any movie. John Krasinski did an absolutely fantastic job directing the scene, along with the rest of the movie. I was thrilled they didn't try to explore the creature's background much in the movie. All we learn in this scene is that they aren't from Earth and they came from space, which we all basically already knew. The stunt work in the scene is also incredible, and the scene with the car and the bus chasing it was very tense. I also love that the scene wasn't just there to be there, and it actually does affect the plot. We need the scene to introduce the relationship between Emmett and the Abbott family. The scene was definitely my favorite scene in the movie, but that's more because this scene is fantastic and has nothing to do with the other scenes. Like the first movie, this one is incredibly tense. Almost every scene gets you on the edge of your seat without dialogue for a large portion of the movie. It is astonishing to me that these movies are able to achieve such a high tension level with such a small amount of dialogue. Most of the tension actually comes from the camera work. When it wants to, it lets you see the destruction the monsters are causing, but at other times, it only lets you see it from the viewpoint of the characters, which makes you feel like you are right there with them near the monsters. Once again, the acting is superb, particularly Emily Blunt, Cillian Murphy, Millicent Simmons. The lack of dialogue really allows the characters to show off how great they are, since they have to communicate to the audience without talking. Regan is really the main character of this movie. For the most part, the movie follows her and Evelyn and Marcus are sidelined. However, this movie keeps going back to them for some reason. Their storylines don't affect the movie much. I love these scenes, but they don't feel nearly as important or impactful than the ones with Regan and Emmett. It's hard to count this as a flaw of the movie since these scenes are so good, but I kind of have to, since I would have rather we see more of Regan and Emmett's journey instead of them. Or you could just have those scenes affect Regan and Emmett in some way, then they would feel more important. One thing I loved about the first one is the characters are smart. In many horror movies, you often find yourself yelling at the characters because they're making a bad decision. Not in A Quiet Place. Not once while watching this movie am I thinking, "You are so stupid, don't do that." This movie keeps up with this, with one exception. At one point, Marcus leaves the baby to explore the factory, but it is revealed that the baby doesn't have much oxygen left. I didn't care about the oxygen. He didn't know how to check that, so I couldn't really blame him. What I hate is that he left to explore. If something goes wrong, which it did, he would have no way to protect himself from the monsters. This was a cheap way to get him and the baby surrounded by a monster, and I didn't like it. In this movie, we are introduced to many more characters. First, we meet people who attack Emmett and Regan at the dock. Those scenes were very intense and I loved it. The only problems I had were, 1, I wish we could have gotten to know more about Emmett's past with these people, and 2, why didn't he just yell and have the monsters come in the first place? They ended up saving them eventually, but it felt like he could have got that done earlier. We also meet people on the island who are safe from the monsters. I thought it was very smart to introduce people who were living life as someone normal in this movie. That is what made it so especially horrifying when a monster got there, because they really didn't know how to deal with it since they don't really encounter them. We have not yet gotten confirmation on a direct sequel to this movie, but we are getting a spin-off directed by Jeff Nichols, director of Mud and Midnight Special. Personally, I hope this movie is a prequel which centers around Emmett and shows us how he met those people that he killed at the dock. I'm not so sure we need an A Quiet Place Part 3 though. This movie didn't end in a way that makes me need one, but if they announced one, I would be very excited. Overall, I really like this movie, and I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I gave the first one a 10 out of 10, so this one is slightly worse, but it's still a great sequel, which I can't wait to watch back to back with the first one. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.